I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Turkmenistan to introduce an address by the head of state.
Благодарю вас.
I wish to thank you, distinguished Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great honor to present a video statement of His Excellency Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov, President of Turkmenistan. Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, first of all, I wish to congratulate Mr. Volkan Bozkır upon his election as President of the 75th session of the United Nations General Assembly, and I should like to wish him every success in this important position. I also wish to request that Mr. Tijani Mohamed Bande accept our sincere gratitude for his able and effective work as President of the 74th session of the General Assembly. Dear participants, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to begin my statement with deep condolences to the families and loved ones of the hundreds of thousands of those who perished as a consequence of the coronavirus pandemic. I also wish to voice my admiration and gratitude to the doctors, paramedics, nurses, technical staff, volunteers, and all individuals who have, for many long months, been working selflessly to save the lives and health of people in many different parts of the world. Our gaze is focused with hope and faith on scientists and researchers as they strive to develop vaccines and drugs to stop the pandemic. I address them with gratitude and a willingness to provide all possible support in their most important mission. Yes, today it is incumbent upon us to speak first and foremost about this grave new danger faced by humanity in the 21st century. In a short period of time, COVID-19 has become a real, perhaps most formidable challenge of our time, a global challenge that knows no borders, races, nor nationalities, a pandemic that has had an adverse impact on all areas of civilizational development. Perhaps for the first time in many decades, the whole world has perceived its vulnerability in the face of a common threat. And we hope and believe that it is only possible to surmount this challenge through concerted efforts. The only way to vanquish this scourge is to pool our efforts, to have a more clear-sighted and wise approach that will lead us to improve ourselves. And this provides us with an opportunity to better ourselves for the sake of the entire planet. Let us not allow this opportunity to slip away. Let us show dignity, solidarity, and genuine humanism, our loftiest political duty and humanistic duty. Since the very beginning of the outbreak of the pandemic, sir, Turkmenistan has proactively adopted all the necessary measures to counteract this threat. Effective protective measures were adopted in a timely manner. A unified national strategy was crafted to combat the coronavirus infection, and this strategy consists of a set of organizational, legal, financial, economic, medical, and health-related and quarantine-related measures. Concurrently, our country has established close international cooperation, both bilaterally and through international organizations. It is worthy of note what is worthy of note is our close cooperation, that of Turkmenistan with the United Nations. In this context, we fully support the calls and the appeals of the United Nations Secretary General, those issued in his statements dating 23 and 30 March 2020. In the light of the initiatives of the Secretary General, Turkmenistan has, at the state level, adopted a national plan of preparedness for prevention and response to acute infectious diseases. Further, a plan of operational, social, and economic measures in Turkmenistan to counteract the coronavirus pandemic has also been adopted and developed. At the same time, Turkmenistan has continued its long-term effective partnership with the World Health Organization. We highly value the role of the WHO in the fight against coronavirus. Their recommendations have shown to be of great value in our country, and these recommendations serve as important guidelines for the activities of medical and other institutions. We shall continue to expand and build upon our cooperation with the World Health Organization and to elevate this cooperation to a systemic long-term level in order to effectively counter the pandemic and to end it. What is more important than ever before is close professional coordination and the pooling of efforts of the medical and scientific communities throughout the world. And we are firmly of the view that today what we need are comprehensive, systematic, and focused multilateral cooperation to address the issue of dangerous viral diseases, a full launch of scientific diplomacy channels. In this regard, Turkmenistan proposes that the development and establishment of appropriate international instruments be considered. Specifically, we consider appropriate, under the umbrella of the WHO, to establish a special program of the World Health Organization to research the coronavirus genome, to develop a multilateral mechanism for pneumonia control, to establish a methodological center for the treatment and prevention of acute infections. We stand ready to meaningfully engage with others on the implementation of these initiatives, to engage meaningfully with all interested countries and international bodies. Distinguished participants, the coronavirus has had a significant negative impact on the course and direction of the global economy. The pandemic has stymied the global community's efforts to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. In this context, we look forward to stepping up cooperation geared towards restoring economic and trade relations. Today, there is a need to create platforms to place the global economy on track towards sustainable growth. In our opinion, energy, transport, industry, and trade should become key areas. And in this context, during the 75th session, Turkmenistan intends to step up its efforts to forge international legal instruments of the United Nations in the field of stability and reliability of energy transit. Issues of cooperation in transport are no less urgent. As one of the initiators of wide-ranging international cooperation on transport issues, Turkmenistan has proposed to consider the issue of ensuring stable international transportation during emergency situations. We have prepared the corresponding draft resolution of the General Assembly, and we have submitted this document for the consideration of United Nations member states. We believe that what is being planned to be held in Turkmenistan next year, namely the International Conference of Ministers of Landlocked Developing Countries, we believe that this conference will will transform into an effective platform for developing coordinated approaches to this problem. A proactive role in efforts to restore the global economy and to promote trade and investment should be shouldered by the World Trade Organization. Having recently acceded to WTO observer status, Turkmenistan will proactively tap into the opportunities opened up in this regard to promote practical measures to overcome quickly the crisis phenomena in the world economy and to ensure transition towards a positive direction. Distinguished heads and members of delegations, the coronavirus has, to varying degrees, affected many countries in the world. However, it is especially dangerous in ecologically disadvantaged regions of the world. Unfortunately, there are many such areas when one looks at a map, and it is impossible to mention all of them during this statement. Therefore, I wish to touch upon an issue that is of vital relevance to Central Asian states and nations. I refer to the Aral Sea disaster. Amidst the escalating pandemic, the situation there is worsening. This is threatening lives and health of people. The risk of epidemic outbreak has considerably risen as a result. Under these circumstances, we urge the world community to pay very close attention to the problems endured by the Aral Sea and the Aral Sea region. Of course, there is work underway to address these issues. This work is substantive, both through the United Nations and by other international organizations that have been providing assistance to the International Fund for Saving the Aral Sea. We thank all of these organizations, and we highly appreciate their efforts. However, I wish to be frank. Today, that is not enough. To save the Aral Sea, there is a need for a focused approach, concrete practical assistance, and meaningful support to the people living there. Therefore, we strongly believe that the subject of the Aral Sea requires a systematic and comprehensive approach, as well as relevant legal documents. They need to be set out, and this issue should be set aside as a separate direction of operations of the United Nations. In this regard, Turkmenistan has put forward an initiative to create a special program of the United Nations for the Aral Sea Basin. We also wish to emphasize the importance of what was adopted at our initiative in April 2018 and May 2019. I refer to General Assembly resolutions adopted on cooperation between the United Nations and the International Fund for Saving the Aral Sea. Today, these resolutions serve as a platform to consolidate joint efforts on the Aral Sea issues. For the establishment of international legal frameworks to address the Aral Sea issue, in May 2021, during the session of Escato, Turkmenistan will present an initial draft of the concept and structure of the future special program on the Aral Sea. We call upon all states and relevant international organizations to consider and discuss these documents. Distinguished participants, the 75th session of the General Assembly is occurring amidst complicated, painful events which are related to the escalation of military and political events that unfortunately we have been witnessing today. The assessment of these events, their causes, and their cause and effect relationships may differ, but what is certain is that they have had an adverse impact on the overall international situation. This has led to an erosion of global security foundations and has led to obstacles in the way of economic, trade, and humanitarian relations. There is a danger that the potential for conflict will continue to proliferate, that hotbeds of tension will arise in various areas. and this will bring in more and more participants. We are particularly concerned about something we have been observing of late, namely disregard for international law. In the light of the current situation, there's a need to consolidate efforts to strengthen the role of international law, multilateral legal instruments in the global security system, strict compliance by all states with universally acknowledged norms stemming from the United Nations Charter. This is the only way we can sustain stability and predictability in global politics, and this is the only way to mitigate risks of conflict. One of the ways to achieve this is by restoring trust in international politics through the establishment of a culture of respectful dialogue. As is known, in September of last year, the General Assembly adopted a resolution at our initiative declaring the year 2021 the year of international peace and trust. Turkmenistan is putting forward an initiative to organize next year, to organize an international forum on peace and trust. We believe that this can provide a potent impetus for constructive and respectful multilateral dialogue on pressing issues and items on the present-day global agenda. Mr. President, this year, Turkmenistan will mark an important anniversary, the 25th anniversary of the day our country institutionalized the status of permanent neutrality in the international community through the United Nations on December 12, 1995. Neutrality has been one of the foundations of our statehood for a quarter of a century. And this has been reflected in both domestic and foreign policies. The principles of neutrality, values, and ideology has proven their full alignment with our national interests and the United Nations objectives and goals. In February of 2017, the General Assembly of the United Nations unanimously, with the co-sponsorship of a large number of states, members proclaimed the 12th of December the International Day of Neutrality. The neutrality of Turkmenistan is an appeal and the establishment of conditions for equitable, respectful, mutually beneficial international partnership in politics, economy, environmental protection, ensuring food security for all, fair and effective distribution of natural resources of our planet, support for and assist for refugees, migrants, and stateless individuals to address many other pressing issues of the modern-day world. Turkmenistan's neutrality is a lofty mission of peacekeeping. Our country's readiness to engage in peaceful political diplomatic tools to address all issues emerging at both the global and regional level are laudable. A key, vital, and integral component of our neutrality is preventive diplomacy. It is highly symbolic that what has been established by a decision of the General Assembly with support for neighboring states and Security Council members in Ashgabat, what was established is a United Nations Regional Center for Preventive Diplomacy for Central Asia. Following the logic of our policy of neutrality for regional peace and security and development, and to consistently unleash the potential of preventive diplomacy during the forthcoming session, we will propose that the General Assembly consider a draft resolution entitled "The Role of the United Nations Regional Center for Preventive Diplomacy for Central Asia, peace, security, and development in Central Asia directly depend on the settlement of the situation in Afghanistan. The position of our country here is principled and unchanged. There are no alternatives to negotiations. All past experience has reflected the fact that methods of force and coercive approaches cannot lead to agreement nor reconciliation. Our country, as Afghanistan's neutral and immediate neighboring state, stands ready to provide the necessary political and organizational conditions on our soil to establish peaceful dialogue between the government of Afghanistan and all parties interested in a political settlement of the situation in Afghanistan. Furthermore, we believe that the key condition for political stabilization, social and economic recovery in Afghanistan's successful integration into the global economy lies through implementation of large-scale infrastructure projects with Afghanistan's involvement. Such projects should be primarily focused in vital sectors such as energy, transport, and communications. We have been consistently working to that end, and in that regard, we have initiated the construction of gas pipeline along the Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India route, and as well as railroads and fiber optic communication lines with access to Afghanistan. These projects have already entered the stage of implementation. We urge the international community, business circles, and financial institutions to become more actively involved in these efforts. Distinguished participants, the United Nations has been and will remain the most important partner for our country. We always seek to align our steps at the international stage with the spirit and letter of the United Nations. And today, Turkmenistan, with full responsibility, is declaring our staunch commitment to the great, lofty ideals that lie at the foundation of the United Nations. We believe that the ideals, the values, the principles of the United Nations will remain relevant. The United Nations was, is, and should remain the sole international organization with universal legitimacy. Turkmenistan strongly believes in the future of the United Nations. We shall continue to strengthen and build up strategic partnership with the United Nations, thereby making our contribution to the tapping into of its inexhaustible potential for the benefit of global peace, security, and progress. Thank you for your attention.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the President of Turkmenistan for the statement just made. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Egypt to introduce an address by the head of state.